Back to the Lipoedema podcast. We are your hosts, Shell
and Tiana, and tonight we are joined by a special guest, Heather Quinn. Heather, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Hi, thank you guys. Looking forward to it.
We're going to get straight into it, Heather. How did you come to learn of lipoedema and when was that?
I became really ill at the beginning of last year, and it was because through recovery, part of that was actually going to a physiotherapist, and I started going to the physio, and he had a look and was helping me out, and he said, "Oh, we've got another physio at our centre that deals with lymphedema and lipedema," and I had heard of lymphedema but not lipedema, and so I just went, okay, so do I go and see her, thinking it was lymphedema? And I made a time to see her in August last year, and as soon as I walked in, she started asking me some questions, and she said, "You've definitely got lipedema." And of course my brain just went into override and just went, what is that? Like, I've never heard of that in my life. And she started to explain everything, and yeah, it was really overwhelming. And I sat there like I'd been hit with a 2x4. So had no idea what it was, and asked lots of questions. So that was August in 2023.
Oh, wow, that's really recent, isn't it? And it is overwhelming. It is overwhelming. So had you been searching for answers up until this point? Like, had you ever thought there was anything wrong with your legs or however your lipedema was presenting?
Yeah, so now I know that is what it's called. I always knew something wasn't right. And I obviously couldn't go into a doctor and say lipedema because I'd never heard of it before. But I knew that over the years, because I'm 52, and I knew that over the years, I've got 4 kids. I know that each time I had a kid, my body was changing and I was sort of fluctuating with weight and things like that, but I was never losing the fat around my body. And it wasn't until I knew something wasn't quite right, which is one of the reasons I sort of had like a middle-aged life crisis where I thought I've got to get some intervention from people, which is why I went to the physio, because I lost 42 kilos in a year. And I sort of thought to myself, surely my body should change. Like, surely I should be looking thinner and less flabby, and I didn't. And I started then searching for answers, going, what is going on with my body? And it was then I started to think to myself, if I look back, well, it's actually when she was asking me the questions in that first consult, when did you first notice that your body wasn't okay, or it wasn't, looking how you wanted it to? And I started to think back and I thought it was around 12, and that's a long time ago, where I started to think, I don't look like the other girls. And, my top half was really quite thin, but my bottom half wasn't. And it was around puberty that I started to change, and my legs started to get bigger, and I got dimply legs. And, obviously at 12, you don't think that anything's sort of wrong in that way. But I suppose having then come right down the other end and reached menopause, I realised that the mobility had changed. The pain was getting worse. The way I was able to function was getting worse. And then I suppose my epiphany was, okay, lose weight. That'll fix it. Let's get on with it now. You've ignored this for too long. And I was extremely overweight. And as I said, 2022 was the start of that journey. And I lost 42 kilos. But I think I then started to realise, well, what was the point of that? Because I don't really look much different. And that's when she said what it was and started to describe that and explain that to me, it was a bittersweet moment, to be honest. I sort of thought, great, yep, good, I know what it is now, but bloody hell, that's huge. How do I deal with that? Yeah. So it was eye-opening, but at the same time crushing at the same time.
Yeah, all the emotions. Hey, so it's almost like I felt empowered, I felt validated, but then it was like, oh my goodness, that is just too much.
Yeah.
And I know I put all of the paperwork they gave me in my drawer for 12 months. I only picked it up again like in December last year. I'm like, yep. I'm not even looking at all of that stuff that is further down the track for more testing and everything else. It was just way too much.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, there was always something my dad used to say to me, and like this is sort of going to come back round to what I'm trying to say, but like my dad would say to me, and I don't think he meant anything by it, but he used to say to me as I was growing up, it must be jelly because jam don't shake like that. And I always used to think that was Dad having a laugh with me. You know, I always used to think that was Dad's quirky way of trying to relate to his daughter. And, you know, the more I think about that, you know, every time he said it, it stung. And I didn't know why. I couldn't put my finger on why I was feeling like that, but it just never sat right with me. And I remember the afternoon that the physio diagnosed me, I looked at her and I remember asking her, I said, so what, this isn't my fault? And she went, no, none of this is your fault. And I remember it was, you mentioned a really like relevant word there, validated. You know, my whole life then felt validated. And I just burst into tears. Like the floodgates opened and she said to me, you know, well, not was I, you know, was I okay, obviously, but she asked me where the crying was coming from, and all I could remember was my dad's comment. And, you know, Dad passed away 32 years ago, but so that still has stayed with me. And I just said to her, I said, my dad's comment, I never understood why it hurt. And I said, now I do. And I said, and, you know, there's nothing I can do about that. And you get on with your life and, you know, you learn to box those comments away. But to hear that the way I was, how my body was, and the trouble I was having with my body wasn't my fault, was actually really quite powerful to know that at the age of 52 and how long I've been living with this. And the more I've spoken to other people, and I'll get around to my research in a minute, but the more I've chatted with people with this, you know, through my research, I found that most women aren't diagnosed until their 50s, well, at least 45 plus. And by that stage, because they've had no interventions up to that diagnosis, you know, their stage, you know, and their level are higher because, you know, they've gone through this like I did, not knowing. And I think that's the saddest thing about the findings that I found out through my research is most women are going through life and finding out 50s, 60s, 70s without knowing what this is. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that is why we started this podcast, because we want early intervention. We want those stage 1 girls to know what it's about. We want people in their 20s to hear about it, because I was 48, bang on the average age. I was 48 when I heard the word lipedema for the first time.
You know, it is really challenging because up until that point, you know, you asked me before, you know, did I know sort of or connect that something wasn't right? And yeah, I did. I knew in the back of my mind something wasn't right. I knew in the back of my mind I didn't look like a giraffe, like, you know, the 20 other million girls next to me. But I didn't know why. And I didn't know why on the netball team, you know, my legs were always bigger. I didn't know why, you know, after I had my 4 babies that, you know, despite losing all that pregnancy fat, you know, my body wasn't changing. And to know that that wasn't my fault was just a revelation and has really changed actually how I think about life completely. In the what, 6 months, 7 months since I found out, the way that I look at life now is just totally different, which has actually in a way been a blessing. Yeah.
It's great to hit midlife and have this knowledge, hey?
Yeah. So now you can move forward with that, and because everything makes sense, you stop beating yourself up. Yeah,
Yeah, that's the empowering side of it.
absolutely.
Now, did you want to talk about your weight loss journey? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so I weighed 137 kilos. And I don't mind sharing that because I think, enough things with women are taboo in society. And I think that, if we can't start talking and being honest now, when are we ever going to be able to? So I've got nothing to hide. So I was really obese. And I was working at this school where, because I am now a student counsellor, but I was an English teacher. I've been an English teacher for 29 years, and I don't wish that on anybody. So if you're considering what profession to go into, don't become an English teacher. And I remember this school that I was at. My car was parked up a sort of a slight hill. And there was one afternoon where I was tired and I was just really struggling. And it wasn't like a steep hill, it was just an incline. And I started walking up there and I couldn't. And I was limping and I was breathless. And I knew my car wasn't far away, but I got halfway up and I just started crying because I was in so much pain that I couldn't move. And I kept putting one foot in front of the other because staff were going past me or, like I was trying to hide that I was crying. I remember I stopped halfway up and like basically made up that I was looking up something to get something out of my bag so that I could get my breath and to hide my face from crying. And I got in the car and it was only a 15-minute journey home. And I cried. I started the engine, I cried and sobbed the whole way home. And I literally broke down. It was a pivotal moment, and it was October the 6th, 2022. And I broke down. And I got home, I sat there, didn't know what to do, and all of a sudden this Light and Easy ad came on the TV, and not wanting to do product placement or anything, but that came on the telly, and it just kept coming up. It was almost like somebody up above was trying to send me this sort of planets aligning message, and I just looked at it. Normally I discuss, things like that with my husband, can we afford it? Can I do that type of thing? And it was like, I just went, bugger it. Like, I'm going to do it. And I started to sign up for it and it worked for me. I know it doesn't work for everybody. That's all good. But it just gave me a focus. And I think as mums, and I'm sure it's different for everybody and it is different for everybody, but I think as mums, we always put everybody else first and we don't tend to look after us. And for the first time, I felt empowered, confident enough to go, you know what? Now it's my turn. And that night was probably the most influential night, that breakdown, that realizing in that vulnerable moment that I needed to do something drastic. That's changed my life. And so I've still got some more weight to lose, obviously. 42 kilos is not going to, solve everything. I now don't give an absolute, excuse my language, but rat's ass what people think of me when I get in the pool anymore. Sorry, I'm from country South Australia. I don't live in the country anymore, but, I say it how it is. And, I get in the pool now. I still wear leggings and stuff. I'm still, I don't know, conscious of the way my legs look. But, I get in the pool, I go down the beach. I just don't care anymore because I realise that, you know what, we're all different. Women come in all shapes and sizes. It doesn't take away from who we are or how we care about people or who we are as women, but just accept myself. Like, who cares? And So yeah, that end of 2022 was absolute life changer. And I'm exercising regularly. As I said, I've been a bit sick, without going into too much detail. I nearly had a life-threatening moment in April last year, so I've sort of been recovering from that and had more surgery in January. So, like, the whole conservative measures thing with the lipedema had to be put on hold. But I'm getting there and getting back into it. So, yeah. I mean, I still at least feel positive about things, whereas I think if I'd gone through that health scare 2 years ago, don't know if I would have made it. Like, I think, I would have come out of it being really depressed. As it is, I've come out going, oh, yeah, that happened. That was pretty shit. But, pull yourself together and move forward. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, Heather, I think this is such an incredible reminder that life and our health goes on beyond our lipedema diagnosis. So you have had something significant health-wise happen to you, and that's it's important for us to remember that this is not our only diagnoses. We can't treat this in isolation.
Yeah.
Like, we just have to live as healthy as we can with what we've got, and sometimes that's multiple comorbidities or multiple
Okay.
illnesses.
Yeah.
And that's, yeah, thank you, finally got there. And and that's tough. So I'm sorry to hear that you had such a terrible time. I'm so glad you got through it. And you're too right. If you didn't commit to your health journey that time ago and do something for yourself and put yourself first, you may have been in a very different circumstance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, to know that I needed more, because I had to have abdominal surgery again in January, and that came out of nowhere. Um, you know, Life, whatever the universe is up there, and people's beliefs and stuff, somebody or something was giving me a good whack to go, you got to get your life together, honey, because, I needed a wake-up call. And that journey of, I don't know, searching for success, whatever that means, and the three-figure salary and, the posh car and all the rest of it, I'd been down that track. Like, I've been the head of English at, three major colleges over here in Adelaide. And, I have been wanting to aspire up the ladder and, get into senior leadership and, over the years. And, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to take the huge pay cut. I want to have time to get in the pool with my morning aqua classes. I love what I do now. So I went back and when I turned 50, I've always wanted to be a student counsellor, and 25 years ago actually started a course, and for different reasons. So my second child was diagnosed with childhood cancer, and we went down that journey. And then I found out I was pregnant the day she finished chemotherapy. I found out I was pregnant with my third child. So, my husband, I then just started a master's in counselling. And my husband just looked at me and he went, something's got to give, hun. Like, and I looked at him and I said, don't ask me to give up my study, because this is something I've always wanted to do. And he went, the kids come first. And he was right. Of course he was right. But, once again, I put that dream on hold and it never went away. So, for another 25 years, I kept going in the classroom. And I'm sure people would say I was a great teacher and all the rest of it. I was an okay teacher. Like, I found that care that I had for the kids was coming through every single day I went to work. And the actual side of things, where it was the marking and the drafting and this and that and something else, I was losing that passion. And I don't know, epiphany again. I sort of turned 50 and I thought, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. And so I continued working as an English teacher, but then went back to uni full time and got myself a graduate diploma and a master's in counselling. And yeah, and then a college in Adelaide has given me my first gig, and I love it. I go to work with a smile on my face, and I don't have to hide anymore the pain I'm in, or having a limp, or make up excuses like, oh, I tripped down the step, that's why I'm limping, or I wear skirts because I was brought up never wearing pants, and I used to come out with stuff like that. And now I just go, and I just feel so light and get to work early and come home with a smile on my face. And it was the best decision I ever made in my life, doing what I'm doing now. So, which sort of is interesting because it's funny, because it's what's led me here. So, if I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be here speaking to you. I wouldn't have done my research. I wouldn't have probably learned what was wrong with me, because I would have kept going on that guinea pig treadmill of looking for success and money and, all those things we're told bring us happiness. So, yeah.
Oh, I love that. I too have just finished my master's in counselling.
Oh,
I'm a teacher.
cool. Yeah. Hopefully not English. I'll probably put my foot in it.
No, special ed. I'm
Oh,
special
cool.
ed. But yeah, that is my next move, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, it is exciting. That's really cool. Well done.
Thank you.
So, Heather, you have hinted a few times about your research, and I'd love to delve into that now.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us how you got into the motivation for your research piece and what it was about, most importantly?
Yeah. So I'd always decided that, I was going to do something education related, and the research unit was the last part of my master's. And a girlfriend of mine that funny enough met through the course, because it was an online course because of COVID and everything. When I told her about the diagnosis in August, and of course, teacher brain, I was researching and doing my own readings and all that type of thing, and referring to Dr. Google. And she sort of messaged me and she said, "What are you doing, woman?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "Why are you going to do your thesis in something to do with education when you're doing all this other research?" And I said, "Oh, I can't research lipedema." I said, "Who's going to care about that?" And she said, "Are you kidding?" She said, "Leave your education stuff." She said, "And do something completely different." So I gave it some thought, and then I sort of thought, oh, yeah, all right. But I kept reading, what lipedema was. I kept reading, how it's always been misdiagnosed. I read about, as I said before, the ages that women are diagnosed. And there was nothing really specific. It kept sort of hinting at all the research. And I started reading, I think, initially like 30 something articles, and I was getting really frustrated because nothing was really mentioned about how it affects relationships. And then I sort of went, oh, okay. So I did this what do you call it, like a mind map thing, and I started to formalize that, and it kept coming back that there were these massive gaps about how, relationships with, partners or friends, how the disease affects that. From there, I narrowed it down even further, and I started to think, hang on, what's the biggest area of my life that I feel this has affected? Now I know what it is. If I was to be really honest with myself, what's an area that's really impacted me physically, my well-being, how I see myself? And I started to realize it's my intimate relationship. And, I won't go into detail because my husband would have an absolute heart attack if he knew I was talking about things in detail, but won't do that. But I started to think, for me, that's actually been the biggest impact. So then I started to really narrow down my searches. There was nothing. There was nothing worldwide that looked at how the pain and how body image associated with lipedema affects intimate relationships. Everything I read hinted around relationships. That was it. And I thought, oh, come on. Like, women have enough problems with body image as it is. And then if you add pain into that, then I thought, well, surely that's got to have more of an impact. And then I thought, we lack confidence in so many different areas about ourselves. So I use social media. I went on to the Lipoedema Australia Facebook page and then the Lipoedema South Australia page. And I posted a question and I thought, and Tiana, we sort of hinted at this before we started, that if you get one person, that's great. You sort of think, oh yeah, beauty, I've got somebody who's answered. Well, I wrote the question and I wrote, how has lipedema affected your relationships with a partner? And I started to get responses. Within 24 hours, I had 120. And then and then I felt completely overwhelmed. I sort of thought to myself, almost like an imposter, because I thought, these women are sharing these really personal stories with me. And it was like I'd opened a can of worms. It was like not just me, because I think you live in isolation when you're going through something like this, and you don't think anybody else is suffering the way you do. And all these people started coming back with, me, it's affected me, it's this, I don't deserve love. I was in a relationship, but he left me because of this. And within a week, and this is no word of a lie, I had over 300 responses. And I had people messaging me privately, so Facebook Messenger. I had people from all over the world. So I've had women in India, I've had women in Scotland, I had a woman from New Zealand, and I thought, crikey, I'm not an expert in this. Like, I almost wanted to sort of shut it down, and I almost wanted to put up there, no, stop messaging me, because I don't have any answers here. Because there were women that were then emailing me 4-5 pages of typed stories and sharing their stories. And it was overwhelming to the point that it was humbling, that I felt privileged, that I felt like I've really hit on something here. And so I took all this back to my lecturer, and she was in the health sciences at Torrens University, where I did my master's. And I said, what do I do with all this? I said, I've got so many women that have shared their journey with this. And I said, I've got no idea what to do. And she said, well, firstly, there's your thesis. She said, look at, shape your thesis around this. And I wrote the thesis and I put up on, you can go back and have a look. I put up on Lipoedema Australia Facebook page. I said, if anybody wants to read it, like when it's written and when it's graded, because, it could have been a load of crap. Who knew? I don't know. And when it was graded, and I thought, yeah, all right, that's not too shabby. Without, singing my own praises, it was an HD. And I thought, yeah, that's all right. That's good enough to share. So I then put it up and I sort of thought, okay, who wants to read this? And again, so many people, and then people sort of emailing me for updates going, have you written it? Can we read it? And there was one woman that I remember, and I've not got rid of any of these messages. She said to me, you've understood everything that I'm going through. You've understood how I'm feeling. She said, nobody's ever been able to do that before. She said, in what you've written in your thesis, she said, and she was in her 60s, this lady, and she said, no one has ever been able to actually tap in to what I'm going through and how I feel. And with that, I sort of thought, I need to do more with this. You know, all of those years, well, I said before how I was getting bored with English teaching and, you know, I mean, look, Shakespeare's got his place, but he's been dead for a really long time. Like, you know, we got to be teaching some new stuff. You know, I don't think Will's going to be that offended. And I was getting really bored, you know, and I thought, oh my God, if I've got to teach this one more time, like, you know, seriously. So, but the thing that being an English teacher allowed me to do, and it's all made sense as well, is I can write. I know how to write okay. And I started thinking, I can't just shelve all these beautiful people's stories. I can't just forget about that, because then I'm doing them a misservice, and I'm no one special. But I just thought, I've got to be able to use that skill I've got, which I've developed to teach thousands of young people, to write something that's going to help in some way. And so I went back to Torrens and I said, you know, what can I do with all this? And my lecturer said, well, there's a PhD and you need to compile that and you need to do something with it. And so, you know, I'm currently in the process of putting an application together. I'm actually going to do something called a standard narrative, which is qualitative research with a PhD. And obviously there's, you know, confidentiality clauses and getting permission from these women, but they would all be anonymous anyway. And I'm actually going to compile them. And I'm actually going to put together the diaries of a lippy lady and, you know, tell the story. And I'm going to call it It Must Be Jelly Because Jam Don't Shake Like That. And I'm going to make a positive out of all those years of negative. And you know what? I don't know when that's going to be finished, but I've got it all sitting there waiting. And I just now need to find the time, because once it's there and I get that permission, I think it will be the shortest PhD in history, because I know what I want to write, and I know that the way these women have shared their stories, it's just going to come together on its own. So, yeah, that was a very long-winded answer. I'm sorry about that.
No, you had me at every word. It was such an inspiring story from start to finish, and how amazing that, you know, you're progressing through to a PhD. I think it's going to be a fascinating read, and you're right, it's paying homage to all these women that have trusted you with these intimate stories about their intimate lives,
Yeah.
which, as I said, will be a fascinating read. As you were going through your research and reading about these women's stories, do you have something that really stood out to you that you learned through that process?
Yeah. Through the stories, the amount of women that said that they didn't deserve to be loved. That, you know, that was the thing that really stood out to me.
That's
And,
so
you know,
sad, isn't it?
it just kept, it was just extremely sad. You know, I'm really lucky. You know, I've found, you know, my other half, and you know, we've been married for 30 years, and he's a good egg, and I've lost the receipt, so I can't take him back. But he gets it, and he doesn't care. And, you know, there were some really beautiful stories of really decent men out there who have stood by their partners and who just keep reassuring them that they are beautiful and that they're loved, and they don't care about their body shape. But crikey, some of the stories I heard of what men have said, and I want to stress here, one of the areas that I didn't touch on in my thesis was same-sex relationships, and in my conclusions, that was an area that I wrote that was as a suggestion for further research. Mine was based on heterosexual relationships, because I suppose vicariously, I was almost sort of referring to me and mine, and you know, how that's affected my heterosexual relationship. So yeah, that is an area that definitely needs to be delved into. So the stories that I got told were about heterosexual relationships mainly, and some of those stories were heartbreaking. And you know, women who you know have been told by partners that you know it's because of their bodies that they don't want to be with them anymore, that you know they, because they've gone into levels of depression because of this disease, men have left them. You know, this podcast isn't long enough, you know, the stories that I've been told, and it's just broken my heart. But you know, I have connected with some amazing, beautiful women. Like, they're total strangers, but you know, Facebook Messenger, you know, is a gift to us, because it's allowed me to be able to interact with these women. It's allowed them, as I said, I'm no expert, but it's allowed them to have somebody who understands and who will listen. And you know, some people have even kept messaging me and just to give me updates and share things, you know, how they're feeling, or they want to be loved. They want to be in a sexual relationship. But some women were even saying to me that they're so ashamed of their own bodies because of this disease that, you know, they can't look at themselves naked, you know, and that's heartbreaking. And one woman said, if I can't, how can I subject a man to? And, you know, it's that type of thing. And yeah, look, you know, I ended up using, you know, getting back to your question, Tiana, I had like over 80 references that I used for my thesis. And, you know, it all came together that, well, I suppose to be able to be physical, it helps if you're not in excruciating pain. I mean, let's be honest. And, you know,
Funny that.
well, yeah, you know, if you're wanting to sort of have a good bunk up, it helps if you're not, you know, struggling with pain. And, you know,
Absolutely.
when you think about
And the hypermobility as well.
the mobility, you know, moving and going, oh, you know, and then actually going, oh, hang on a minute, you know, it interrupts intimacy. And that's without the whole perception of body image. And getting intimate with a partner in the dark because you're so ashamed of how you look. Now, if you put all that together, that makes intimate relationships extremely challenging. And, you know, all this stuff you get told by the experts, you know, to be able to, especially with middle-aged intimate relationships, you know, where your body's changing, menopause, you know, hormonal changes, etc. That's hard enough as it is. You know, like, never mind all of this on top of that. And, you know, that word, try and relax, try and enjoy it, you can't. You know, I mean, I was getting to a point, without being obviously too personal, that, you know, if we were to be intimate, you know, I was taking painkillers to be able to enjoy myself, to be able to be that intimate, because, you know, my left side has been particularly affected. And you were talking before, Tiana, about comorbidities, and in 2009 I was diagnosed with MS. And for years and years they told me it was fibromyalgia, but eventually I went for tests, and you know, it's non-progressive, so I've been very, very lucky. But with that, and then with the lipedema and what that's done in regards to my body shape and the you know, the lipedema fat deposits and you know, etc., it's made mobility incredibly difficult. And, you know, I love my husband, you know, he's an absolutely beautiful person, and I am really, really lucky. But I feel guilty every time, and I'm not on my own when I say this, because I now know that there's hundreds of beautiful women out there just like me who, are in pain, who don't like the way they look, who struggle, and then come to the conclusion that because of those things, they don't deserve love. And that's so tragic. Everybody deserves to be loved. But it's just because society has, I don't know, created this stigma, which, let's face it, people, it's 2024. Like, if we can accept other groups in society and which we're saying that we need to be more accepting, well, that includes us. That includes women, be accepting to women and how women are. And I don't think society's caught up yet. So I think that's an area that really needs to be not just tokenistically, I don't know, tick box, with politicians or in government. Oh yes, we've addressed women's issues this year, hooray. It really needs somebody to look into this disease and to recognise it in this country, because that is the most, out of the research I've done and the stories I've been told, to hear how elitist this thing is, that, some women cannot afford to have the necessary treatments or the measures that are necessary because it costs too much. No medical condition in this country should deter somebody from having the treatment that they need because of money. And until it's actually registered with Medicare, that is going to continue. And that's breaking my heart the more I read into it. I know that's very political, so I apologise there. But,
No, but I think you're also contributing to the awareness, especially in the medical community, putting out a PhD and having things published like that legitimately, like that is an area of reach that, Shell and I don't have. We're more reaching out to the community, whereas we need people like you to be able to reach out to the medical community and everything. So, we value what you do, and we can't wait to, hear more about your PhD.
cheers.
And I love your messaging. Like, it's so sad and tragic that people don't feel like they deserve to be loved. And by what you're writing, you're actually proving that, like, we all do deserve to be loved, and we also deserve to have these intimate relationships and to feel confident in our intimacy. I feel like we're a real long way off, but the more people like you we have spreading awareness about this stuff in a legitimate way, I suppose. Not that any form of awareness isn't legitimate, but I suppose, like, I don't know, what you're doing is pretty impressive, and I'm really grateful for you to share. We are running out of time, so I wanted to ask you.
Sorry, one thing I just want to say is, so I don't know if any of the listeners are going to be going to the Lipoedema Australia conference in June in Melbourne. But I've actually been asked to be one of the speakers there. So I'm actually delivering my research on the Sunday morning. So a bit of a spruik. I'll be going into a lot more detail and presenting my thesis and talking about my own journey in more detail. So I look forward to meeting anybody that's listening. If they're coming to the conference, please come up and say hi. And then if you are interested and you haven't already to share your story, I'll have my notepad ready. Oh, that sounds old, doesn't it? No, I'll have my laptop ready or my device ready. And I'm still a pen and paper girl, sorry. Let's catch up and have a cuppa and have a chat. So I'd love to meet all of you.
That sounds fabulous. Thank you for letting us know, Heather. That is super exciting because both Shell and I are attending the Lipoedema Australia conference, and in fact Shell is also speaking, which is fantastic. Shell is speaking about body acceptance,
I will be there.
Yeah, between you and Shell, we're gonna I'll be listening with bated breath for both of you, and maybe we will have a coffee together.
Let's do that. It's a date.
Yay, awesome. So, Heather, our very last question: if you could go back and give your younger self a pep talk, what would you tell her?
That it doesn't matter what I look like, that no one is perfect. And, if we think about it, if we were all the same, life would be bloody boring. So, we are all here to look different, and it doesn't matter what we look like. So, and to try and not let things people say to you have a lasting effect. To try and move on and not let those comments that we get told stay with us for the rest of our lives, which is, those comments I had from my dad. Love him very much, but they've stayed with me for a very long time.
Yeah. That whole sticks and stones saying, it doesn't really ring true.
No.
All the time. They do hurt. Words hurt.
Words do hurt, and we need to do more about educating how much words hurt, and those words continue to hurt even when we get to middle age. So more needs to be done in that area, I think. But yeah, so yeah, that's me. That's my journey so far.
What an incredible journey, Heather. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I've loved it. So I'm just so glad that, I've learned how to do this, and for the listeners, I've never, ever done a podcast before, so I'm no longer a podcast virgin. So that is something I can tick off my bucket list. So thank you so much.
You're a natural, Heather. Thank you for joining us.
Cheers. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it.
You take care.
Okay. Bye, everybody. See ya.
Bye.
When we started the Lipoedema podcast, we relied on word of mouth and existing connections.
Our following has happened organically, and we are so honoured by your support.
As we learn more about the world of social media and algorithms, we have a request.
When you are listening to our podcast or watching on YouTube, let us know what you think.
Hit follow or subscribe.
Leave us a comment or write a review.
The more engagement we get, the more our message is shared.
And the greater our reach to those women suffering in silence.
Thank you for listening to the Lipoedema podcast. Lipoedema and its symptoms vary from individual to individual. The opinions and advice voiced in this podcast are of a personal nature and used for educational purposes.
Please take away from this podcast what resonates with you, and please see your GP or preferred specialist for diagnosis and healthcare. We are Shelley and Tiana from the Lipoedema podcast. Until our next episode, bye for now.